that's going to allow the 5G towers to track people. What are your thoughts on this? This is very interesting.
We're too quick to dismiss people's worries about these things. And that's sometimes where the general public, scientists, and healthcare professionals fall down in that conversation. And it's about, being open. It's not about, oh, well, don't be silly. Of course it won't do that. Oh, don't be, why are you worrying about that? Why are you, we only take in the information that we have access to.
Hello everyone, I hope you guys are doing amazingly well. It's your girl Fejiro and welcome back to Fejiro Talks. In this very video, yes, we are going to be doing a long-awaited COVID-19 vaccine discussion. What I mean by we is as in you guys who have forwarded me your questions and concerns about this vaccine, me and my immunology lecturer, Dr. Sarah Ainsley, and she's just basically spending some time to just talk to me, discuss some questions, discuss some concerns about the vaccine, and just basically use her professional opinion to just break down some of the very hard scientific things about the vaccine, about the COVID-19 virus that you guys have asked us to discuss. Okay, so I've got some clips of us discussing on Microsoft Teams. So if you hear poor quality audio or poor quality video, bear in mind we couldn't do face-to-face because of COVID, so take that into consideration. But also, please guys, leave your comments down below. I'll also link in the description box some resources that Dr. Sarah Ainsley kindly has given me to share with you guys, especially if you guys want some more information, more articles to read about these vaccines. I hope you guys find this video informative, educational, and just a great addition to your conversations about the COVID-19 vaccine. Making sure that you leave a like on this video so we can optimize it, so more people can view it, as well as leaving a comment down below. We want to hear your opinions, we want to hear your views. Make sure to get active with me on socials. I obviously communicate a lot with you guys on my Instagram page and my Instagram stories. That's how you guys knew about this video, that's how you put your questions forth. So for any other common videos, if I do have Q&A type videos, I will be advertising on my Instagram story for you guys to interact with me, what questions you want me to ask. So please do make sure that you're active with me on there. And without further ado, let us get into this video and I'll see you on the other side. Bye.
If you don't mind, would you like to introduce yourself to people who might not know who you are?
Hi everyone. So my name is Dr. Sarah Ainsley and I'm a senior lecturer at Keele Medical School, and my specialism's in immunology. That's what I teach there.
Yes, and she's an amazing lecturer. I've learned so much over the past 3 years just from your lectures alone. Even though in first year it was like, wow, information shock, but the diagrams on your lectures are top tier. Okay, so we did have a lecture from you, I think about 2 weeks ago, just breaking down what we know about the vaccine, what we know about the virus. But a lot of the people that will watch this video might not, have been there. So would you like to just maybe briefly, because I know there was a lot of that great information, but just briefly kind of condense what we do know about the virus, what we do know about the vaccine to this day?
Okay, that's a good start there. Yeah, so condensing my hour lecture into a couple of minutes. Really, when I delivered that lecture, it was about finding out where we are now, because an awful lot has happened in a very short space of time, really, from us thinking there was some sort of new pneumonia around in China, early on in the year, to where we are now in a global pandemic. An awful lot's happened, and our understanding was quite rapid as well. So finding out that it was a novel coronavirus, and these viruses, some strains cause the common cold. So about 30% of common cold cases usually are caused by coronaviruses, but these strains have very mild symptoms in individuals and they circulate around the human population every year. So what's new about this one is that it's jumped from an animal host into human population. And that's where the problems arose. So like SARS back in 2003, 2004, and then MERS that came later, this is a variant of coronavirus that's come from an animal reservoir. So the human population doesn't have any pre-existing immunity to it. Our bodies are seeing it for the first time, which is why it's had such a devastating effect. So there's no herd immunity in the global population. So it spread very rapidly and very quickly through, it came out in winter. we couldn't distinguish it from normal coughs and colds. So people were going about thinking they had a cold, and it spread quite rapidly across the globe. Sort of from then we've been able to identify its genetic sequence, and that's really helped scientists to start on this incredible path towards having a vaccine. And it's been really amazing how quickly we've been able to turn this around, and that really shows the global community coming together to achieve that, and actually what science and government can do combined to turn something around. And I think it's really positive that we're at this point now. And it's been a really long road, and the effects of the COVID-19 that SARS-CoV-2 has had have been horrendous and are still causing global effects. But hopefully we are now getting into this tipping point in the new year, that these vaccines that are coming along, we've got one at the moment that in the UK has been regulated, which is the Pfizer-BioNTech combination, and then the Oxford AstraZeneca virus, the data has gone to the regulators just recently, and hopefully in the new year that one's going to be approved as well, with the Moderna vaccine not too far behind.
Right, so a lot has basically happened in the past 11 months, but there might be some people that actually don't know how vaccines work, and I know it might seem like common knowledge for people from scientific background, but there are a lot of people that might not know actually how do vaccines work. So if you wouldn't mind just explaining a little bit.
Absolutely, and I think it's a really important question, because we've all grown up with vaccines, and we're very lucky where we are that we have a free childhood vaccination scheme in the UK, and so you're trotted out at a very young age, given your vaccines, but actually we don't often sit down and spend the time to tell people what this is. We just take this. So a vaccine is a way of teaching your body about something that could cause problems in the future. So in our bodies we have a series of cells which are called the immune system, and they circulate around in your bloodstream looking out for things that are going to cause infections. So most of the time they're happily protecting us against all the things we're picking up off surfaces, we're inhaling, and we don't even know we're getting sick. And what a vaccine does is it takes a teeny tiny bit of that thing that might cause an infection. We call those pathogens. So it could be a virus, it could be a bacteria, something else, and we take a tiny bit of it that we know it needs to cause us harm. So it might be the way it gets into cells or the toxin it produces. And we take that bit and we formulate it into a vaccine, and we give it to our body to show it to our immune system. But because we're only giving it a little bit of it, or we're giving it a version that's not infective and not dangerous, that can't replicate and cause disease in a human. So it just sort of sits there and gives the immune system time to have a look at it, work out what it is, and develop an immune response against it. And the great thing about the immune response is that it then creates something called memory. So after our immune system has dealt with what we've shown it, we remember what it was. And we have tiny proteins called antibodies that stay in our blood circulation. And we have memory cells as well, which reside around our body. So that when or if that actual infectious agent then comes along, we already know what it looks like, and we can respond really, really quickly. So we could prevent the infection establishing or clear it much quicker. So that's what a vaccine does. We don't put in the pathogen that's going to cause you harm. We just put in a little bit of it, or a version of it that can't replicate and cause trouble. And it means then that when we come across those things, our body's already pre-ready to respond, and it can clear it away. And that memory response is something our bodies do all the time when it encounters things on its own.
No, that is a really great explanation. And we know from medical history that vaccines have been so useful in eradicating a lot of diseases. Smallpox is something that we don't actually see a lot of. There are rising cases of mumps and measles, but that has definitely decreased a lot because of the vaccines that we've had. Polio is another one that we created a vaccine for, and it has implemented a lot of disease eradication. So vaccines are generally good. They're generally great things. But people do have a lot of fears, and they have had fears just in the past in regards to just vaccines, but especially in regards to COVID-19 and this vaccine that has come out, or the series of vaccines that are coming out. And we've compiled a list of 10 most common questions / fears that people have in regards to this vaccine. We're just going to run through them. I have the first one here, and the first one says, how come other conditions like HIV, AIDS and cancer have no cure, but in less than a year COVID does?
Yeah, and I think this is a really good question, and it's actually one of the, I guess, the problems with vaccine success is that, well, if we've got all these vaccines, why can't we just make them for everything else? And because we've managed to turn the COVID around so quickly, you'd think, well, why is nobody bothering with anything else? And unfortunately, not all of the infections and all of the diseases that we suffer from are as simple as others. So a lot of the vaccines that we've got, and also the virus that causes COVID-19, it's quite simple. We know structurally what it looks like, we know how it gets into cells, and we know if we can prevent it from getting in, if we can target that bit, we can stop the disease establishing. So with vaccines, you need to have an obvious thing for the immune system to target. So it has to be able to see it. It has to be consistent in that pathogen, that thing that's causing disease. So it can't be something that it constantly changes. And it has to be something that's going to help it prevent disease establishing. So for viruses, that's usually something on the surface of them, and it's usually the thing that it uses to attach and get into cells. The problem with HIV is it's a really clever virus, and it's constantly mutating much more rapidly than coronavirus does and changing its surface proteins. So the only thing that it keeps the same is actually the bit that's inside it. So we have lots and lots of predominant strains of HIV. I think there's about 60 predominant strains alone at the moment which infect humans. So to have a vaccine, at the moment we can't have a single vaccine that's going to protect all those people. And we have attempted to develop HIV vaccines, and it's still ongoing. And some of the best are coming in around 30% effective. So some viruses and some infections are very tricky in that they themselves have learned and evolved in a way that prevents them from staying the same and looking the same for very long. So that's why the HIV vaccine is taking a lot longer. You know, I think we'll probably eventually have something that's going to work. And cancer is another interesting one. And actually the idea of vaccination for cancer is something that's been building over the years. And the problem with cancer is it's something that's us. Right. So cancer is derived from our own cells. And our immune system learns not to attack our own cells. And actually that's something that goes wrong in people with autoimmune conditions. So our immune system is looking for things that don't look like us. So it often misses cancer. But what we can do, and what some cancer vaccines are actually being developed for, is we look for changes on the cancer cells, put that tiny change into a vaccine, and train our immune system to then seek it out. And actually the company and the technology that's been used for the coronavirus vaccine that we've got now, this RNA vaccine, that technology first started in trying to develop vaccines for cancer. And we actually have several that are in clinical trials which use that same vaccine technology to train your immune system to look for the cancer cells. And it's been actually quite successful in patients. The problem is, again, there's not a consistent single thing. It's really hard to make a vaccine that's going to then protect everybody from getting, for example, skin cancer, because every individual is going to pick up different mutations and changes in their cells and is going to need something different. So I guess the reason is that we're lucky in that coronavirus is a simple vaccine and it's a simple virus in its structure, and we've been able to identify a target, and we can use the same mechanisms and strategies that we've used for other vaccines that we've been developing for years and years. Whereas other diseases like HIV and cancer, the thing that's causing disease is very clever, and it's quite difficult to find a single target.
Yeah, because it keeps changing. Yeah, that's a great explanation. And in a sub part to this question, because I actually I forgot to ask this at the start, but a lot of people might be wondering what is inside this COVID-19 vaccine. And you've talked a little bit about how, we know that there is a specific protein that we can monitor, and that doesn't change with COVID-19. So what is that protein, and what is actually inside this vaccine?
Yeah, so both the one that's been put into regulation now, so the Pfizer BioNTech one and the Oxford AstraZeneca, and most of them are relying on us training the immune system to see something called the spike protein. And that's a protein that's on the surface of the virus, and it's what it uses to stick to our cells in our respiratory epithelium, so in our airways, and allow it to get inside.
Right.
So all of the vaccines that we're looking at the moment are trying to produce that protein in our bodies, so our immune system knows to then look for it when the virus comes in with it on its surface and block it from getting into our cells. Now, the vaccine that we're using at the moment, so the Pfizer vaccine, is a messenger RNA vaccine. So this is, all of our cells in our body have DNA. Yeah. And to make proteins, they take that DNA and they make a little copy of a bit of it, just one strand of it, and they use that then as like a pattern or a template for building proteins off it. Mm-hmm. That's the messenger RNA. Okay. So what the vaccine's doing is it's taking that little strip that we've made in the lab that codes for the spike protein, and it's putting it inside our cells, so our cells use that pattern to start producing the protein. Right. Thereby exposing the immune system to the virus protein without the virus ever having been in the body or near the body. So it's really safe in that it doesn't even have anything that resembles a virus, it's just that protein. And if we can encourage the immune system to recognize that and do a defense against it, whenever it sees that protein, it will respond.
Yeah. And we've had obviously some news that this has 90% efficacy, so we know that it is effective. So talk us through, like, what does that actually mean when we say that this vaccine is 90% effective?
So the studies that were done is they split groups of volunteers to having a placebo. So this is something that doesn't have anything active in it. It might just be an injection of saline. It might have had a previous vaccine. So Oxford used a meningitis vaccine as their placebo. So placebo is something that hasn't got the active ingredient that you're trying to test and we know is safe. And the other group had the vaccine. Right. And then the studies, they had it, they didn't know which one they were having, and then they were just allowed to go out, report their symptoms, and monitor for infection. And what we do then is we keep watching this and looking for infection in the two groups. And then each of these studies had specific points where they were going to announce sort of results. When they got to this many infections, they would see what the differences between the two groups and so on. So what we've seen is that with the vaccine that we're using now, they, at 170 confirmed cases of coronavirus in their big trial group, 162 of them were in the group that didn't receive the vaccine versus 8 in the group that did receive the vaccine. So that's where the 90% efficacy comes from. And so compared to a group that didn't receive the vaccine versus those that did, 95% more people got infected in the group that had the placebo.
Okay, that clears up a lot. Thank you. Okay, so we've got the second question that says, is it true that the vaccine interferes with our DNA? And you kind of covered it a little bit about mRNA and stuff. So just expand a little bit on that.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the fears around this vaccine because it's very new. Okay, so this is the first vaccine that's been licensed that uses this technology, which anything new could be kind of scary. Yeah. But it doesn't actually go anywhere near our DNA. So think of our cell as a round circle, and inside it is the other bit, which is the nucleus, and that's where our DNA lives.
Okay.
And we make, every day, our cells are making, like I said, little copies of bits of our DNA, which are instructions to make proteins. Yes. And they go from the nucleus into the cytoplasm, which is the bit around inside the cell, and it's there that they're changed into, they read the little pattern and it makes proteins. So what this vaccine does is it's taken its own little strand of RNA, it's packaged it up into a little circle of fat molecules, and that allows it to pass into our cells and release that pattern into the cytoplasm. And then all our cells will do is keep copying that until it degrades. So it copies it, makes that protein, and the cell then expresses that protein. So it's not interfering with our DNA, it's not going into anything, it's not sticking to anything else, it's not interfering with any of the other machinery, it's just another pattern that our cells then start making proteins from. So they'll do that alongside all their normal processes. So there's absolutely no worries about this one going anywhere near or getting into our DNA.
Yeah, I think that will definitely reassure a lot of people, because I've heard that fear kind of a lot, and especially a lot of social media platforms as well. Okay, cool. So the next question and I think the next couple questions cover some of the side effects, especially some of the worries about testing and how people actually, receive the side effects. So question 3 says, will I get sick after taking the vaccine? And in particular, some people highlighted fainting, facial palsy, stuff like that. So they were kind of scared about that. So
Yeah, so I think side effects and being sick from vaccines is always something that people worry about as well. And often, again, it's something that might be in a label, or someone says, oh yes, by the way, look out for. And actually, if you ever stopped and read the labels or the packets of any of the medications you take, you'd probably be terrified of all the side effects and never take paracetamol again.
Exactly.
So everything that we put in our body, there is a teeny tiny risk. Yeah. And everybody's body reacts differently to things. So, for example, I might get the same cold as you, and I'd be really sick with it and in bed for a week, and you just have a little sniffle and brush it off. And that's just the way our bodies react to different things. So you couldn't 100% say that every single person is going to react the same way when you give a vaccine. But what we do is we make sure that all of the components are going into a vaccine. We don't put anything in there that doesn't need to be there. We test the vaccine for safety. So the very early trials are about how is it tolerated? Does anyone have bad side effects? Does it do anything to people that we're worried about? And when it's given in those early stages, you give a test vaccine to somebody, to one person, you monitor them very, very closely, but usually about 24 hours to check for anything. And those are in safe clinical situations. So we are very, very careful when putting new things into people.
Yeah.
So you couldn't 100% say that you're not going to have a reaction to it, because everybody's going to react differently, and we'll always have that one story of somebody who got a really swollen arm, or I fainted, when I was younger I used to faint getting my childhood vaccines at school. I think that was probably just because I would wind myself up on I really think.
Yeah.
But vaccines do cause an effect. So we often get at the injection site redness, swelling, you might get a bit of a fever. They're actually all good things, because they show you that your immune system is reacting. Our immune cells live in our blood vessels, so they're circulating around our body. Yeah. And when we're given a vaccine, we need them to go to where the vaccine's been put into the body so that they can see it and react to it. And in order to do that, the vaccine encourages a little bit of irritation in the site so that the immune cells can come out of the blood vessels and into the tissue. Right. And when they do that, obviously your blood vessels are going to get a little bit dilated, so the area is going to look redder. It might feel a little bit warm because there's more blood flow to the area. You might get a little bit of swelling because of fluid coming in, the cells coming into the tissue, but it's really minor, and it's actually an indication that your skin, where the injection has gone in, is reacting, and your immune system's coming in, seeing that vaccine and taking it away. Right. And the same with a little bit of a fever. That's the immune response responding to seeing that, and that usually clears up within a few hours. Yeah. So those normal sort of things that people are advised against when they get a vaccine are just the immune system going, ooh, what's that? And dealing with it, and they usually settle down within 24 hours. And this coronavirus vaccine that we're talking about, very, very minimal side effects have been reported. So again, a little bit of redness, maybe a bit of swelling. Some people have said mild headache. So really just the things we'd expect with a vaccine. And at the moment, there is no safety concerns that have been raised. Obviously, certain people who have very strong allergic reactions to vaccines, so to the point that they have to carry an EpiPen, they are advised not to get the vaccine at the moment because there were 2 reactions in individuals who had an allergic reaction, but they had a history of allergic reactions to vaccination. So if you've never had an allergic reaction to a vaccine, then there should be absolutely no fears or worries about this at the moment.
That makes sense in regards to that question about side effects. So question number 4 is about the effect on fertility or future pregnancies, because it's something that we haven't heard a lot of information about, especially for young women or for women who are still in the period, premenopause. What would your response to that be?
So I thought this was a really interesting question when you came through, because I hadn't actually heard of this one or worries about this. Actually, when I did a bit of research, I found that there's quite a lot of fear on social media at the moment about the spike protein looking very similar to, that's the one on the surface of the coronavirus, looking very similar to a protein that's needed for the placenta. So I wonder if this is where that worries come from. So every protein is made up of a string of little units called amino acids. So if you string all of those out, if you look at a sequence, there'll always be similarities between proteins. But that doesn't mean the body reacts the same way to them.
Okay.
Because how it all folds together in a 3D structure is really important. So I think there's been a lot of hysteria around this idea that what's in the vaccine looks very similar to this protein, and that maybe our immune systems will get confused. There's at the moment absolutely no concerns about that in the makers of these vaccinations, and I think the structural similarities are completely sort of negligible. So I personally, I don't know exactly. No one can know until we see way off in the future, and we've done years and years and years of this. But to my knowledge, there isn't any concerns over fertility or future pregnancies in any vaccination that we deliver. And in fact, not getting vaccines for some of the things is actually more detrimental, because some viruses can affect the placenta and can cross over into the developing baby. So actually, the advice at the moment is, if you are considering getting pregnant and you're in a high risk group, if you're offered the vaccine, to have it, because getting the virus might be more damaging to the developing baby. So yes, as far as I've seen and from the research I did, I think most of this fear is around this idea and this that the spike protein and this other placental protein are very similar, but they're not going to react the same way. And those, I really don't see personally that there's anything in it which is going to cause any effect on fertility. We're talking about a virus that affects predominantly the respiratory system, which is miles away from that.
Yeah, from the reproductive system. That's really good. And the next question kind of ties into that, because it's talking about the effect on pregnant women, because the vaccine, hasn't been tested on that. So do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah, so vaccine regulations and actually any medicine regulation is really stringent. So we test in healthy individuals first of all, and then we widen those groups out. We don't test things unnecessarily on at-risk groups. So generally medications, this is why nearly every medication says not suitable for pregnant women, because it's never been tested on pregnant women. So until you test it on a group, you can't be sure it's safe. So you would never want to say, have it or not have it. So because the vaccine hasn't been tested on pregnant women, it is not advised to be given to women that are pregnant. It doesn't actually mean that there's any harm or any effect on them. It's just around the ethics of taking a group and using them in a trial, because if it did have an effect, the results there, the ethical dilemma is horrendous. So really the recommendation for it not being given to women who are pregnant are because it hasn't been tested. Now, it's highly likely it's not going to cause any problems in pregnant women, but you would never ever take that risk. So instead, the hope is that if enough of a vaccine uptake, women who are currently pregnant will be protected because other members have got them. Certainly, if a woman was pregnant and someone else in their partner or someone else in their family was offered the vaccine as part of the uptake, then the advice is to take that, because you're then reducing your risk of passing something on to them, and there's no worries about you having the vaccine and then partner being pregnant and you passing anything on that way. It's safer for you to have the vaccine when you're offered it to actually provide protection to people who can't have the vaccine. And that's the same for young children as well. So we haven't tested this vaccine in the very young, so it's again not advised for children at the moment.
Right. Okay, and that's a really good point that you talked about. We didn't really talk about it before, but it's about herd immunity and protecting the people who actually can't take the virus. So there will be in every population some people who are very high risk, and I'm just going to let you just go into a little bit of an explanation about like the high risk groups and how herd immunity actually protects them.
Yeah, so all vaccines that we have rely on this idea of herd immunity. So no vaccine's 100% effective. So even if you gave it to 100 completely healthy people, some of them, it won't develop an immune response in. So they will not be able to have it. So immediately you've got a clutch of people who aren't going to be able to respond through no fault of their own. You then have individuals that have issues with their immune system. So they might be immunocompromised because they're on certain medications, for example, cancer patients. Or they might have an autoimmune condition, which means that they can't, they don't develop the right sort of immune response. They could be very young. So when you're very young, your immune system is still developing. And when you're very old, your immune system actually starts to get tired and it's less effective at responding to new things.
Right.
So at either end of the spectrum and then various individuals in the middle, we've got people who can't have vaccines. Either because when you give them the vaccine, their immune response won't be able to develop a protective response. So it's completely ineffective in them. Yeah. Or because their immune system is something compromised with it, it can't respond to that vaccine properly. So even though, so for example, some of the vaccines that we use are live attenuated, it's called. So it's a version of usually viruses that is the whole virus, but it's changed so it can't replicate in the body. Okay? Yeah. So it's the whole virus, but it can't replicate and it can't cause disease. Okay. And you give it to people in the vaccine and their immune system clears it. Mm-hmm. Now, if your immune system is compromised, it might not be able to clear that effectively. And then there's a chance it can persist in the body and cause problems. So certain individuals can't take certain vaccines because we're not sure their immune system, we couldn't be 100% certain their immune system would be able to deal with it, and then you're putting them at risk. Right. So there's lots of little populations of people then who can't have a vaccine. So instead, they're relying on other people having it. So for an infection to cause problems, it has to have people it can spread and jump to. And we've seen that with coronavirus. It's why we're all told to keep our distance, wash our hands, cover our faces, because we're trying to restrict the spread to people. So if you have a population of people and some of them are vaccinated, that means that infection can't get to them and spread out from them. And the more people you have vaccinated, the less people it can jump between.
Right.
And every disease that we have has this R number, so this ability to spread and how many people it can infect. Yeah. And associated with that, a percentage of herd immunity that we're targeting. Right. So if something can spread really easily, we need more people to be vaccinated so that it's got less people to jump between. If it's really hard to spread it, it's not as, the herd immunity can be lower, because if it's harder to pass to people, you don't need as many people in the pool to be vaccinated, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
So because COVID-19 is actually really transmissible, the predictions are currently somewhere between 60 and 70% of the population would need to be vaccinated to slow down and prevent that spread and protect the people who can't take the vaccine.
Right. Okay, that is a really good explanation, especially of how the statistics say 60 to 70%. Do you feel like that is attainable for us?
It should be. It definitely should be attainable. We're, at the moment with the vaccine program that's being rolled out and the strategy we're looking at for who we're vaccinating first, we're aiming in this first wave to get 90-95% of the people that we think are vulnerable. So the populations that end up with severe disease end up hospitalized. Wow. So the aim at the moment is to vaccinate the people most at risk, reducing hospitalizations, reducing the burden. Now then we continue to roll it out and we try and achieve. Hopefully, I think public opinion of the vaccine is relatively positive. We're all desperately hoping to get back to normal. So hopefully enough people will take it up for it to have that positive herd immunity effect. Our biggest issue at the moment is the time it's going to take us to get to that point. Because particularly with the vaccine we've got at the moment, the logistical issues of getting it to different people, getting people vaccinated, not knowing whether we're going to need multiple boosters of it, are all question marks at the moment. But the hope is that we can achieve that sort of magic number, whatever it turns out to be.
Yeah, I hope so too as well. Because it's definitely really, really important in the population just to protect those who can't have it as well. I think we've kind of answered further questions that, that talked about herd immunity. So that was question 9 that relied on herd immunity. So we've kind of covered that. So I'll go back to number 6. Number 6 was, how have the long-term effects been measured with such little time? And we've kind of talked about this, saying like we haven't necessarily had the timeline to measure such long-term effects. But do you have any other news or any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I guess this is the problem with being as quick as we've been. Just the benefit downside, we're working on every month we know a little bit more. So every month of following people who've been affected, we know how much longer their protective immunity lasts, how much longer they have antibodies in them, what percentage of people actually develop protective immunity, whether you can get reinfected, all of these questions. So we start to have good ideas, but we can also look back at other infections. So things like people who had SARS and MERS, which were several years ago now. There are still studies looking at what protective immunity patients who recovered from those have, and it appears that antibody responses, so that protective protein that we need, they last quite a lot longer than for the common cold varieties, and this particular SARS is more similar to those. So there's sort of hope there that antibody responses will last. There's also the cells that are triggered. We know that the memory cells are there, so hopefully they'll stick around a little bit longer. So in terms of how effective the vaccine is, or how effective immunity after you've established this, we know the vaccine induces protective antibodies and protective immune cells. And we know that it induces much stronger responses than just naturally getting the virus. So individuals have different levels of protective antibodies when they recover from it. Some people make a lot of protection, some people don't. But we know that the vaccine robustly makes a protective response in people that have been trialed in. So the hope is that those are going to last. Now, some of our vaccines, you can have, the measles, when you've had your full course of measles, we think you're protected from life, from following it. For many years it's been around. So it could be that this vaccine provides that much protection. It could be that we need a booster. We are just going to have to wait that out. What we do know is that it produces robust responses and it seems to prevent, hopefully, infection, those serious symptoms. So at the moment, when we want to control how quickly something is spreading through a population, that's a massive advantage. If we then need a booster a year later, we might need a booster a year later. That gives us plenty of time to be efficient in producing this. In terms of sort of long-term effects of the vaccines that we are using, so the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine uses the same basis that has been used in other vaccines already. So we know that is safe. We know that it continues to provide good, robust responses. There's a bit more of a question mark over the Pfizer one because we've not used this vaccine in people before, this type of vaccine. So we're not sure how long it will produce it. But if you've managed to teach the immune system to look out for that protein and we've got that memory response, then that hopefully will be sufficient.
Yeah, I hope so too as well. But in terms of the side effects that we do know of, it's just the minor ones.
I don't envisage there being any sort of down the line side effects that we don't know about. If people are going to have a reaction, they'll have a reaction almost immediately. And when the immune system when it's seen it, it's learnt it then sits quiet until it sees it again. it's very unlikely that someone's going to, have side effects to something years down the line, because the vaccine is there, it's cleared away. You have your memory response. It doesn't stay in the body and keep doing things for years afterwards. So I'm not concerned about long-term side effects. I think the biggest question marks for me are whether we're going to need a booster. So how long that protection will last for any of these vaccines that we're doing.
I think that clears that up for a lot of people as well, because I feel like there has been a little bit of a myth about it just lingering in the system. That explanation definitely clears that up as well. Okay, so we've got question number 7, which says, how effective will this vaccine be against new strains? Because we do have a new strain.
Yeah. So this is the hot topic at the moment, I think, around discussions and sort of, I guess, the fear that came with the joy. So we're really excited. We've got this vaccine, we're rolling it out, and then bam, coronavirus comes around and goes, oh, now I've got a mutation that's potentially making it more transmissible. Right. So there's a few things to think about. So all along, it's been collecting mutations. So viruses do this as they replicate inside our body. They make teeny tiny changes. Right. Now, most of these have very little difference to the virus. They don't change the structure of it. They don't change the shape of it. Our bodies see it the same way. In fact, the strain that has spent most of the summer circulating is different to the one that originally originated in Wuhan anyway. So all along it's been changing, and we're just not publicly aware of this because it's not important. So, but what's happened is there's now this new strain that's predominantly in the southeast of the UK and in other countries in Europe now, which seems to have changed the spike protein. So remember, that's the one that's on the surface of the cell, the surface of the virus, and that's when it uses to get into our cells. And that's the one the vaccine's targeted against. So a bit of the worry at the moment is that if that spike protein changes so much that the what it looks like looks different, then the immune system might not be able to see it properly. Now, at the moment, both companies, so the Oxford AstraZeneca and the Pfizer BioNTech groups, have come out and said that they don't anticipate that this particular variant is going to change how effective their vaccine is. So the changes to the spike protein, we don't think has changed it enough that it'll look different. So when the immune system sees that protein, it actually chews it up into lots of teeny tiny bits and makes a response to all those bits it can see. So a tiny change in it is unlikely to significantly change what the immune system can see. And at the moment, both companies are quite confident that the way their vaccine is constructed and this change isn't going to make a difference to the vaccine. And the BioNTech group came out actually very recently and said that with their technology, so because they just make this little strip of a pattern to tell our cells to make the pattern, they're quite confident that if a mutation did occur that changed it significantly, they could change that little sequence and produce a new variant of the vaccine, they claim, within 6 weeks. So they're quietly confident that even if these mutations do change the spike protein enough that the vaccine's efficacy comes down, they could potentially just adapt their pattern and roll a new version out. Obviously, we don't want to keep spending, playing catch up with the virus. So hopefully these changes haven't made a significant effect on our vaccine that we've got.
Yeah. Okay. That's definitely really adds a lot of hope to a lot of people's worries as well, because I know a lot of people have been worried that they're just continuously going to have to take new vaccines and it's never going to end. But hopefully, like you said, that change hasn't actually had a massive effect on the protein, so our body will still be able to produce a really good response to the vaccine. Oh, right. So question 8 was, is it likely that the vaccine will mutate and need annual vaccinations, similar to the flu virus?
I'm hopeful not. The coronaviruses themselves don't go through that sort of rapid mutation and structural changes that influenza does. So hopefully it's not going to go down that route, and because it needs that protein to get into our cells, it won't be able to change it massively. Otherwise, it won't be able to function the way it wants to. And the hope is that the way these vaccines are constructed, because they're using the whole protein, the immune system will always be able to see a bit of it, is the simplest way to put it. So we shouldn't need annual vaccinations, because influenza is constantly changing structurally its proteins. So that's why we always need to know which strain's coming. Whereas the evidence for coronaviruses infect humans at the moment is that they don't mutate in that way. And actually these mutations we're seeing at the moment is probably because it is sweeping through the population so rapidly, so it's getting into so many people so quickly that it's getting all these opportunities to collect these mutations. So when we can get this pandemic under control with the vaccine, hopefully then we're not going to see this sort of worry about needing annual vaccinations.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Okay, so like I said, we covered number 9, which was talking about herd immunity. And number 10 is a major one with the younger generation, and I think this one is related to concerns that were initially around March about the 5G towers. But we've seen that as the vaccine has now been talked about, a lot of people have fears that there is going to be a chip inserted into people's bodies with this vaccine, and that's going to allow the 5G towers to track people. What are your thoughts on this? This is very interesting.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I have no idea where the 5G tower thing came from originally, because to me that just, as an immunologist, that seems completely nonsensical. Why would waves of whatever, I don't do physics, have any effect on what's happening in the body or a virus? So yeah, I have no worries about being tracked or 5G devices or that it was made in a lab or whatever. But a lot of these, they're genuine fears for some people, because we're dealing with something that they just, some people have never heard of before. Okay, we throw the word virus around quite a lot, but how many people actually know what a virus is composed of, where it comes from, how it does what it does? So I think sometimes, we're too quick to dismiss people's worries about these things. And that's sometimes where the general public, scientists and healthcare professionals fall down in that conversation. And it's about, being open. It's not about, oh, well, don't be silly. Of course it won't do that. Oh, don't be, why are you worrying about that? Why are you, we only take in the information that we have access to. Definitely. So if people are posting this on social media and it looks genuine and there's people worried about it, then it's going to get into your mind. You think, well, actually, what is that? And actually, I think what's really important is being more open about what things are. And then people can make their own judgments. If you know what's in a vaccine, if you know what the virus is, if you understand it, then people can come to conclusions about it. So you can see where some of these fears have come from. Yeah. And the speed of something like this. We're not used to infections appearing and running rampant around the globe. In my lifetime, the one thing that we were worried about was the Ebola crisis. But again, that was quite far away. It was in Africa. There was a little bit of a worry when somebody flew back on a plane, but it's so detached. And this virus has come along. It's swept the globe in months. It's completely changed the way people are running their lives. So people are going to be a little bit fearful. Where is it? Where's it come from? Why is it so quick? And there's all these questions. And actually, I think it's really important then that we talk about this and we have these discussions like we're having today about, what is a vaccine? What is a virus? I have no worries that there's some sort of secret world government idea to implant us all with chips. To be honest, your phone is giving away way more data than anyone's going to be able to put into a vaccine into you. If you've logged on, if you've bought something off Amazon, if you use Google, if you've got an Alexa in your home, those companies know way more about you than I'd be worried about something someone can put in a vaccine.
That's good. That's good.
And I think, a lot of the fears also come around how quickly we've done this. This thing appeared and now we've magically got a vaccine. There must be something going on there. Because, we spend years developing these things usually, 4 to 10 years easily to develop a vaccine. And I actually think it's really positive how quickly we've done it, because it shows what we can do. So the reason we've managed to produce this vaccine so quickly is because we are way more advanced now in science than we are. So the technologies behind making these things, the platforms, the things we need, the research behind it, we are incredibly advanced now in our understanding above the immune system and how infections cause disease. Yeah. We have turned over huge government, independent, public, private things to working on coronavirus. This is a massive global achievement. If you think about what's here, all the people that have come behind to make these vaccines, money, time, space, science, resources have all been put towards one goal. And we've managed to achieve that incredibly quickly. And that just shows you how when you cut down the red tape and people start to work together and you can put adequate funding towards something, just what we can achieve. Definitely. So I don't, there's no conspiracy theory. It isn't that we had the vaccine on the shelf ready to then immediately give to people. It's just a wonderful example of how, if you put some of the best minds in science together with public funding and with, support from governments and global support and information, how we can actually achieve incredible things very quickly and thankfully incredibly quickly.
Yeah, no, that's definitely one of the things that that reassured me from your first lecture, was how you definitely pointed out that fact that there is a lot of there's a lot less funding for a lot of other vaccines that are released. So especially when this was a novel virus, everybody was talking about it. Governments were quickly trying to, recover their economies, and they needed to get people back to work, and they needed all of these things to fall back into place. There was that much more need for this to be funded, and there was that much more push behind it. So compared to other viruses and other vaccinations, you can tell that there is so much difference.
Absolutely. I kind of think, and that's a really good point, and it's in a way that's the kind of sadness of the situation, that there are things. So for example, the disease that I used to work on when I did research called schistosomiasis is endemic across Africa and Asia and South America, and it has a really high morbidity, and people have been researching vaccine candidates for years and years and years, but it's a neglected tropical disease. There just isn't the funding for it. And we were partway to designing a vaccine for SARS, so the original SARS outbreak. There were some really good vaccine candidates in different phase trials, but then when we managed to get the epidemic under control, which was positive, the funding for those dried up because it wasn't an issue anymore. And a lot of those vaccines just got left along the wayside. So it really does highlight, I guess, the problem, and a problem that people like the Gates Foundation work against every day. They put funding into areas that need it, that aren't the sort of popular thing. They're not causing problems in Western industrialized areas where all the money is, and they try and promote vaccines and treatments for places that are otherwise, and diseases that are otherwise neglected.
No, that's really good to hear that there are foundations, there are charities, there are organizations out there that do have the funding, at least to give to research and treatments that might not be as publicized as this. So I think we have covered all the 10 questions and fears, and it was a great interview and discussion as well. If you were to, I'd want to just round it up with this one question, but if you were to be in a conversation with someone who was still unsure about getting the vaccine, what's the one thing that you would say to them? You have to make this less than 1 minute.
Ooh, that's tricky.
You were still unsure about the vaccine.
So if you're still unsure about the vaccine, I say that, it's really hard. Well, you're probably on the spot now. I think I'd say something along the lines of, we've been developing vaccines for many years. The technologies, the way that we've developed this, they're incredibly safe. And, you don't know how the disease will affect you if you get it. It's much better for yourself and for others around you, people who can't get the vaccine, to take that vaccine and know that you're protected against getting coronavirus and potentially causing or passing that on to somebody else.
Hey, that was a really good, a short and snappy response. So I love to hear it. But thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. And I'm sure a lot of people would have appreciated just hearing your professional opinion as well on some of these questions and just dispelling some of the myths as well, but also taking time to explain it in a quite a non-scientific way as well. So I really do appreciate it. And I don't want to take too much of your afternoon, but thank you again.
Fun.
Okay, so you guys have come to the very end of this video. I'm so glad that you guys were able to watch through and just hear my discussion with Dr. Sarah Ainsley. How did you find this video? What are your opinions about the vaccine? Make sure that you put it down there. I will also be linking in the description box some resources that you guys can have a look at so that some of the unanswered questions that you have can also possibly be answered by those resources as well. And most importantly, make sure to share this video with everybody you possibly know. Let's get these conversations out there, and make sure that after you watch this video, have a conversation with someone. Maybe you have friends that you know have had fears. Share this video with them and actually talk to them about what their thoughts are on this vaccine. The more that we have those kind of information-based conversations with our family members, our loved ones, the more that we can mitigate against some of these myths spreading, and the more we can dispel them. Stay subscribed to this channel for more content, and please press that notification bell to get notified whenever I release a new video. I will see you on the next one. Bye.